guys, welcome back to my channel, Artemis ASMR. Today we're going to be doing something a little different. I'm going to be wishing everyone good night in a few different sections. We're going to start with kind of vague, then specific, then very specific. I'm just going to make them up on the spot. This is inspired by that one guy on TikTok. I'm going to find his @ and put it in the description after I film this. Good night to everybody whose name starts with the letter K. K. Good night to everybody who has had their heart broken by a man whose name starts with J. Good night to everyone who has a pet golden retriever. Good night to everyone whose favorite color is orange. Good night to people in their sophomore year of high school. Good night to every single mom out there. Good night to everybody who was majoring in computer science. Good night to everyone whose favorite French fries are not from McDonald's. Good night to everyone whose favorite flower is tulips. Good night to everyone who has 2 or more pillows on their bed. Good night to everyone who is taking 5 classes in high school. Good night to everybody who plays Stardew Valley. Good night to everyone who owns 3 or more hand sanitizers from Bath and Body Works. Good night to everybody who uses Colgate toothpaste. Good night to everybody who listens to Mitski. Good night, everybody whose favorite pop star when they were younger used to be Katy Perry. We're gonna move on to some specific ones now. Good night to everybody who has received a bouquet of flowers in the past week. Good night to everybody who owns 3 or more purple cups. Good night to everybody whose name starts with A and ends with an A. Good night to everybody who owns a skincare product from Innisfree. Good night to girls who use the Too Faced Born This Way foundation. Good night to people whose favorite candy is Haribo Twin Snakes. Good night to people who have a cactus sitting in their room. Good night to people who run their own plant business. Good night to people that use the Cucumber Dove spray deodorant. Good night to people who have went to McDonald's exactly 4 times this week. Good night to people who have drinking 2 Diet Cokes this week. Good night to people who've received crochet flowers for Valentine's Day. Good night to people that have red slime. Good night to people who still have childhood pictures hanging up on their walls in their room. Good night to people who own 2 pillows from Five Below. Good night to people who still use wired earbuds. Good night to people named Jordan. Good night to people who fell asleep to a cranial nerve ASMR video last night. Good night to people who have spent over $50 at Sephora today. Good night to people who love Trader Joe's soup dumplings. Good night to people who spend over $500 at Costco. Good night to people who have had their Vaseline tub for a few years and somehow still hasn't ran out. Good night to people who were weirdly obsessed with anime during COVID. Good night to people whose favorite character from Sanrio is Cinema Roll and has a shirt of it. Good night to people who drive a white Volkswagen. Good night to people who had 3 chicken wings on a plate with buffalo sauce today. Good night to people to